evening to everybody. This is Christopher Daigan coming to you from our home in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. Yes, that place that you've been hearing a lot about on the news. We are all here and safe. If you missed us on Wednesday, we are both well. We are wishing everyone who lives in this area good wishes. Please look after yourselves. Please be safe. And I think we need this music. We need this moment of Saturday in concert, live stream online more than ever now, it seems. I certainly need it. Yes, the session on Wednesday was a particularly difficult one. I almost thought I wasn't going to be able to play all the way through, but I did make it. It's on our YouTube platform. For those of you who did watch it, you will realize and know that we have had some internet issues again, and it seems again we started off with perfect streaming and then it says that it's not. So sometimes the internet issues might be your side, but at the moment they're actually our side. If this does happen, and it is being recorded tonight, it will be uploaded, the recorded version will be uploaded to YouTube later this evening, which means you can watch it later tonight. You'll be informed of this as soon as it's ready if you are a subscriber, or it will be there tomorrow morning and it'll be free of any issues and problems because it will be uploaded gradually and perfectly. We hope. That seems to be the way to have to do things. Fortunately, the internet apparently is under such stress and strain at the moment with all the goings on that it just simply cannot cope, and especially with our high quality live stream at 1080p, 225 frames per second. It's quite an ordeal for it to cope. Anyway, it is just gone 2 minutes past 6. Please stay with us for the next hour for this wonderful session. We've got a very magical, very beautiful program for you tonight. In our series focusing on one composer, I am playing the music of Claude Debussy, the early 20th century French composer in the program Why Debussy, or I've also called it the magical world of Claude Debussy because it is such magical music and it actually carries so many secretive and beautiful elements along on this wave of beautiful sounds. My button, Barry says my buttons are coming undone. I don't want to reveal too much. So Claude Debussy, interestingly enough, is, before I play this program, is the one composer that I've found that a number of people do not like. They actually really find his music very difficult to listen to. And I think the reason behind this is there are a couple of pieces, like the early pieces which I'm starting off with, like the Arabesque and the Clair de Lune, which I'm playing right at the end, which are in a more romantic, late 19th century French romantic style, which have clear melodies and very beautiful harmonies. But much of Debussy's more mature compositions, where his real genius is exhibited, are much more elusive. There's a great sense of imagination, and the essence of it for me, which makes Debussy's music so magical, is that he paints with sound. He uses sound as a medium of creation, just creating textures, colors, movements. There's often not a particular melody. There's no real element to focus on other than just the impression of the sound itself, and which is interesting because the impressionist artists, painters of the time are so carefully linked and so closely linked, I think, to the composer's music. And yet when people called him an impressionist as a composer, he disliked that term completely. But in many senses, the idea of creating an atmosphere and creating a color, creating an illusion to something that is a reflection of what he has in his mind is so central to what I think his music is about. Debussy's music is, apart from the extraordinary technical elements which he developed, which I'm not going to go into from a musical composition point of view, and the amazing pianistic advances that he made in the style that he created, the elements, the part of the music which I find so fascinating is that he observes the world around him, reimagines it, and then dishes it up to us, serves it to us in the most incredibly beautiful and quite densely written way of these fragments as he's experienced it. And I think that is part of the issue why people find sometimes his music quite difficult to listen to, because there's so many ephemeral might be the right word, motions about it, and often not much to hang into. It's really about listening to the music and being in the moment, this idea of mindfulness, just listening to the moments of Debussy's music and appreciating the beauty of what you're hearing in that particular second is really, I think, what's key to appreciating and understanding his genius and his music and why he is so important. So I'm going to play this evening's program in series of 2 or 3 pieces. I'm going to work on them chronologically from the beginning, and the first 2 pieces I'm going to play for you this evening are the Arabesque, wonderful flowing composition, the Arabesque referring to the idea of a flowing line, which we find in ballet, we find it in art, we find it in design, calligraphy, this flowing cursive line, and in the music, Debussy creates this exact element as well. And just to remind me of a flowing cursive line, here is little Frieda, who's going to say hello to us straight away. Hello, Friedel. Friedel Duft, how are you doing this evening? Yes, are you fine? Frieda's having a very relaxed time today. Yes, you're feeling a lot safer and very content, much more than you have been. Are you breathing into the microphone? Hey, Frieda. Oh, you can't touch the microphone. Yeah, you're such a sweet dog, yes. Oh, you're quite warm, you've been snug. You sit there and I'll chat to you later on, Frieds. And then straight after the Arabesque, I'm going to play another early composition. All the dates of the pieces are included. Debussy, born in 1862 and died in 1918, brings us a very modern life. The second piece, Reverie, Daydreaming, was later turned into a popular song. And both of these pieces really just bring about the magical sense of the piano in terms of its melody, but also in terms of, you can see how he's already moving into this idea of making the music float. There are no pictures for these ones. So Barry's got several pictures for many of the other pieces, but no pictures for these 2 at the moment.
Debussy himself.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry, I thought we were going to go. Right, Barry's reminding me. So, first of all, we want to see what Debussy looked like. First of all, Barry's going to show you a photograph. This is a photograph. Go this way. A photograph of Debussy himself. We often only see portrait paintings, but here, of course, Debussy had been a much more contemporary, much more modern composer, really, and living a modern life. As I say, this is a portrait of him. And then the second picture, which is really fascinating, recently produced by the Iranian computer graphic artist Hadi Karimi. I've got to go that way for this one. And just in the picture, and you can see there, that side, you can see the picture of Debussy himself as created by the artist from computer graphics, from portraits and various photographs at the time. Very wonderful pictures, and I think Barry can even bring them up together maybe, and you can compare the 2 yourself, and they should fit together on the screen. I'll disappear for a second. There we go. How amazing is that? Right, on with the music. two compositions to start off this evening's all Debussy program. I'm not sure what would make anyone not want to like those two compositions. The Arabesque, number 1, and the Reverie or Daydreaming, two early compositions, youthful compositions by the young Claude Debussy. In this evening's program, we are focusing on his music, and I'll be playing you through a number of Debussy's compositions as they develop and as his style changes. Now, I'd like to then move on to one of my favorite pieces of all his compositions, and I think this might be one of my favorite pieces of all time. In fact, if you have to ask me if there's one composer who I really enjoy working on, whose music I find an absolute thrill, it never seems to be a struggle. It's just such an exciting process to work on and discover, and that is the music of Debussy himself. Because somehow this element, for me, these elements of working with sound, of reading what's on the page, but what you see on the page is never what really comes out. It's like a secret code that you read, and then what comes out in the music and the way the hands fit together and the notes that you create that focus on sound is so important that, in fact, it's incredibly magical to work on this music. So this composition, Reflections in the Water, the Reflet dans l'eau, from the first series of Images. He composed 3 pieces of music with the set name Images, and then another set, which you'll hear later on, Series 2. And this first set is really said to be his first real masterpiece. His musical style changes, and he moves on to a great original sense of sound. This concept that he really wanted the piano to sound like an instrument that would create a haze, a wash of color, a wash of sound, and not to hear every individual note of the hammer as you play them. And every individual little squeak we can hear at the moment is, of course, from little Lucy, who's arrived. Hello, little Lucy, the long-haired dachshund. You're coming for your first little introduction. Do you like Debussy's music, Luce? Hands up if you do. Yes, of course you do, because it's gentle. It's so gentle, it's not noisy, and you like the pretty sounds. And you wanted to, yes, no, okay. Lucy says to me that it's not sounding very nice because my piano is out of tune. Yes, Luce, I know that. Apologies, the piano is out of tune. My piano tuner lives a little bit out of town, and with all the unrest and the difficulty in traveling we've had in the last week, he hasn't been able to get in at all. And it's not perfect. Yes, I know what you mean, Luce. Debussy sounds so much better. You played some pieces of Debussy too, I know. And it sounds so much better with an in-tune piano. I know that. Okay. Thanks for your pointer. We'll sort that out. I'll get James to come. You must promise you mustn't bite him when he comes, though. Yeah. So the second composition, after the Reflections in the Water, Reflet dans l'eau, magical music, and Barry is going to bring up, while I'm playing that, several of the paintings from the artist Claude Monet, the Water Lily series, because these paintings are so magical and they fit so perfectly with the same concept of the idea of reflections in water, the fact that you're not really sure what you're seeing, but the effect of light on water is so crucial to these pieces, and it blends so wonderfully. So we're having a kind of audio-visual experience for you this evening. And the second piece, a piece that Debussy composed much later, but I felt that I had to play it at this point in the program, Le Plus Galant. He came up with this idea, perhaps as many other composers of the time in Paris and France were composing popular café waltzes. And he said, well, I'm going to play a café waltz, which is going to out-café and out-waltz everyone else. And so he did the title meaning the most slow or the slowest possible, saying like, I'm going to outdo you all. And it's a really smoky, sultry, sensual, suave piece of music. There's something quite unique about it. But I think it's very pretty and very attractive. So this is Reflections in the Water, Reflet dans l'eau, followed by Le Plus Galant. Very beautiful waltz there, Le Plus que lent, the slowest possible, the direct translation. I suppose there's no really suitable English title for that, as slow as possible or the slowest possible, various versions I've seen around that. Debussy, I think, having a little bit of a dig maybe at some of his colleagues, but at the same time writing an extraordinary, beautiful piece of music. Now, I'd like to move on to another two compositions that really stretch us into this quite unique and extraordinary style of the composer. As I said, one of the fascinating things about it, which is really going to affect much of what I play from here on, is his ability to absorb the world around him, recycle it, contemplate it, reflect it, and bring it back to us. And one of the interesting experiences, and we have to put ourselves in Debussy's position in time and place, is in Paris. And in 1899, I think it was, roughly in that period, there was not only generally a movement amongst people that he was being exposed to different sounds and images from all over the world, the movement of trade. People, it became much easier, or somehow for people to travel. And Paris in particular, being a center of Europe artistically, was really a melting point of all these different places and cultures for people to come together. And in the Paris exhibition of this time, the composer heard a Javanese gamelan orchestra. Now this involves a number of musicians from Java, and they would play in groups of maybe 10 or 20, some players having a number of small gongs, like bells, which they would play with beaters at quite a rapid rate, and other people would play very large gongs with where they would play less frequently. So you had this texture of music of a number of people playing simultaneously. The music would somehow interlock in rhythms, in these continuous patterns of many notes at the top, fewer notes at the bottom, with these very sustained bell-like gong sounds. And this the composer found completely fascinating, and composed a number of pieces around this and inspired by the style. And I'm going to play one of them for you now, which translates as bells as heard across the valley through the trees. Very complicated French title, which I won't even try. But I'm going to point out for you just the way that the composer builds this music, because it's very interesting to see. In the beginning, this is the opening moment. He has a line, a series of notes, so you can say one player might be playing. Those two notes. Someone else might be playing in between. I'm going to pull up the music in case I get it wrong. This always happens when I try and play something. Another player on the top. And in the middle of all that, so if I put this together, which is that's just one moment from the piece. And another fascinating, similar example, long bell sounds in the bass. And then but in between all that, and this layering of sound is what makes the composer's music so wonderful to play, is that you have, it's really trying to be 4 or 5 people at once, 4 or 5 different lines that you're trying to sustain. Not that this piece is particularly influenced by an Eastern motive, but certainly the sound and the uniqueness of the textures and the color make it something quite extraordinary. I've even heard people say that in fact it is not one of Debussy's best pieces, that there's certain weaknesses in the composition, but I think it has something rather magical, and it has some wonderful moments, including this, which I've pointed out once before. Which the composer says, very even to be played like a breeze, a distant breeze. Well, isn't that an amazing way to describe the way you want your music played? Straight after that, I am going to play the third piece from the second set of Images. So there are three pieces. I'm playing number 1 and 3, and this is Poisson d'Or, or Golden Fish, and Barry's going to pull up a picture here which relates directly to this. This is a Eastern lacquer panel that Debussy had in his possession. He had in his study above his piano and admired it regularly. And this is from the Composer's Museum. This is the exact panel which inspired this composition. You see there the inlay, mother of pearl inlay on black lacquer. And the two fish, the golden fish, intertwined and darting through the water is what is depicted here. So this shimmering texture, there's a great sense of excitement and lulling and back and forward movement, and then a moment of respite and quiet before the moment. It builds up into quite a brilliant climax at the end. It's really another extraordinary piece. So this is the two pieces, the bells through the valley of the leaves, and the second piece, Poisson d'Or. real magic there. I think from Claude Debussy, the second series of Image, I played two pieces, the bells across the valley through the leaves and Poisson d'Or, the golden fish. I think that's magnificent, really magnificent music. The darting of the fish, the flashing of light in the water on their scales as they move back and forward, a glimpse of a fish, a glimpse of something there, movement here and there. Really wonderful, imaginative and creative music. So the last set of pieces, or the second last set of pieces that I'm playing as a group at least, is a series of preludes, and these are from compositions in Debussy's last years, where he wrote two wonderful books, 12 set of preludes, book 1 and then another 12 in book 2 a few years later. And each of these pieces, interestingly, he didn't come up with the titles, he doesn't place the titles at the beginning of the piece. They all have titles, but they're all in brackets, and they all have this dot, dot, dot with the title of the piece at the end. And he said it's almost as though those titles could be used to capture the essence, or that could be linked to the music that he was creating. It's not necessarily they were describing what the title entailed. And in these pieces of music now, this idea of Debussy being exploring or being inspired by the world around him is really brought into focus. He was also very fascinated by the early forms of ragtime and jazz. You can imagine this is Paris, 1905, 1910. He would have been really intrigued by the music of Scott Joplin or the early music of the jazz musicians and incorporated some of that into his music, which I'm not playing this evening. But the pieces that I am going to play bring us into a theme of Spanish music, which he composed a number of pieces about. Celtic music, the Scottish Isles, and that feeling of the beautiful landscapes that he saw and was so inspired by. And then the last piece, the Sunken Cathedral, which is where I'm going to start to describe to you quickly. So this particular piece, the Sunken or Submerged Cathedral, it is said, it is inspired by a legend that it is said that on certain mornings at dawn, or certain mornings of the year, off the coast of Brittany, at a place called Ys, that if one listens and watches very carefully through the morning mist and the forest, the fog, you can hear and see a cathedral that once existed and was washed away beneath the waves. And so there's a legend about this, and Debussy captures this element of the cathedral through a number of details, and this is what I'm going to explain in each of these pieces. So if you think of cathedrals, you think of bells, you're thinking of singing, you're thinking of submerged water, you're thinking of great depth beneath the sea and this upwelling of motion. And this is what the composer does. He starts at an emotion of complete transparency, like a glint, the first ray of light that appears over the horizon through the fog, which I think is pretty magical itself. And the water. The chanting of the hymns you'll hear, and a combination of bells. All very distant at first. The turbulence of the water, the great depth. Bells ringing through the water as the vision becomes clearer. And eventually the vision, the cathedral reveals itself in its greatest glory with great bells and now, all of those elements, that the depth of the bells, the chanting of hymns, these are not things that are necessarily only associated with these elements. When we hear a bass note in the piano, we don't immediately think of bells. But putting all these elements together with the suggestion of a title paints a very magical picture for us, and we're able to link all these ideas. The second piece before that, the very beautiful Girl with the Flaxen Hair, Debussy uses the scale, which we often associate with Celtic music, and this very, very gentle, a very pared down texture in the music. If we think of a very delicate, gentle young woman who's sitting very quietly with her flaxen hair, you wouldn't be thinking of grand, full, rich music. It's very one note at a time. Something very delicate, very transparent, this Celtic reference in the sound. And the first piece, the La Puerta del Vino, refers to the gate of the Alhambra at Granada, where apparently one of Debussy's colleagues sent him a postcard of this famous gate, the Gate of Wine, La Puerta del Vino. And here, this Moorish influence, this Spanish style, Debussy conjures up an element of the habanera, which we know. So immediately he takes us off to another land of Spanish music. And a very unusual scale, flamenco. And these sudden outbursts, these flamenco outbursts of sound. And apparently they're called rescuerdos, these strums of violent strums across the flamenco guitars. And this is the elements that Debussy refers to, the references that people will know as this is the Spanish style and the Spanish music, but while creating these very ethereal hints towards what he's working to. So these are 3 preludes then that I'm going to play. The artworks that I have put together from Edouard Manet as well as Claude Monet are not specifically related. The Puerta del Vino have sourced a picture of that actual gate so you can see it. But the others, I found a beautiful painting of Edouard Manet and his Woman with Parasol, which is actually a painting of his wife with his child. And something about that innocence and the beauty, the tranquility of that seemed to be a very fitting moment for the girl with the flaxen hair. And for the Sunken Cathedral, I've put together images of Monet's Rouen Cathedral series, where he painted the facade of the cathedral in over 30 different settings at different times of day, morning, noon, and night. And so I've included that because they do have something of that submerged, watery atmosphere to it. That was the sunken cathedral, the submerged cathedral, La Cathédrale Engloutie, from the Preludes. And before that, The Girl with the Flaxen Hair, and starting off that series of three, La Puerto del Vino, The Wine Gate from the Alhambra, three of the Preludes by Claude Debussy that demonstrated there, I hoped, in essence, of how he absorbs elements that we associate with Spanish music, Celtic music, and with this idea of painting in sound of a submerged cathedral with hymns, choruses, and bells. I'm going to end off, of course, this evening's program with the most celebrated of all Debussy's compositions, and this is the famous Clair de Lune, a piece of music that refers to the moonlight and the gentle and very absorbing gravity I think the moon has over all of us. Apparently the composer was going to call it something else, a promenade sentimental, a sentimental waltz or sentimental walk, you might say, and he changed the title of the piece at the very last minute. He had composed a set of pieces that brought together various rustic ideas and didn't have a slow movement, a core slow movement in it, and then realized that he had a piece of music that he had written many years earlier. So you'll see the date of the Suite Bergamasque actually takes place over about 15 years. He just inserted this little composition, Clair de Lune, into the set, and it has, of course, become his most celebrated piece, I think. The music is magical because right from the opening moments it hangs in the treble of the piano. There's no bass supporting it. This idea of the moon hanging in the sky, quite weightless, is magically caught. Beautiful music there, Clair de Lune from Claude Debussy, and I know that music has very special meaning for more than one or two people out there. And it seems to be just the right fitting, the right ending, the right moment to bring this evening's concert of focusing on the music of Claude Debussy to a close. It's been a very difficult week. I can't believe that, in fact, it's almost a week since last Sunday when I was glued to the TV Sunday evening. I couldn't believe what I was watching, and I've hardly been away from it since. So I hope everyone in KZN and who might have been affected by the unrest in this part of the country as well. And for those of you who are elsewhere, thank you for all your messages and concern. As I say, we are all well. Barry and I are well. It just seems to be settling down. Even little Wendy Poppy's come to see. Yes, Wendy Poppy. Oh, yes, it was very frightening. Oh, we couldn't believe what we were seeing on the TV. It was just unbelievable. Yeah, I know. It was. We want you to jump on and fight someone. I don't know, or take what. I'm not sure what. Yeah, I know, Wendy Pop. It was very confusing. Thanks to Barry for the technical support. And look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for our program of World Cafe, which was postponed from last Wednesday. And I will be playing the Chopin Third Sonata, a really grand piece. I was supposed to play it last week. As I said, I decided to postpone that too. And it's coming up next Saturday. So we've got some very exciting music in the next couple of weeks. We'll be putting out a new email describing or itemizing more or less what I intend to play. I would love to hear from you. For those of you who are following us on Facebook or on YouTube, please send comments. Please do write comments if you're watching live. It's always really wonderful to hear who is watching and how they're experiencing these evenings. We've had some wonderful feedback this week, which I'll tell you more about on Wednesday. And here's come Lucy again. Yes, Lucy. Oh gosh, Lucy, you've worked up. Yes, you've worked up. You're quite a little pudding now, huh? Yes, well, it's all that extra food that I've been having. It's winter lockdown. We're not getting out. I know, Luce. I know all about that. You don't have to tell me, little Lucy. Little Lucy needs to go to the parlour soon. Little Lucy, the long-haired dachshund. And what did you do today, Luce? What did you get up to? Is that your tummy rumbling? I think it's actually mine. Nothing. You did absolutely nothing. Yes, I know. It's becoming predictable, Luce. We know that you did nothing, but it's fine. You just had a nice lie in the bed. Several snoozes today and lots of nice sun because the sun is so lovely and warm. And yes, you have a nice... I saw you even playing with Wendy Pop and Frida. Everyone's come on. Wendy Pop, Frida Pop, and little Lucy. Yes, everyone loves little Lucy. Thank you for joining us tonight. Look forward to seeing you next week. Look after yourself. Stay well. Keep well.